Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. There we are. Thank you, Brendan. Welcome, everyone, to the Cade Museum for our meeting today of the Rotary Club of Gainesville on this Tuesday, June 13th, 2023, on the eve of Flag Day. My name is Tom Collette, your Sergeant at Arms. Please silence your cell phones, everyone. Guests, visiting Rotarians, joining us virtually on Zoom, identify yourself in the chat. And if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, register your participation. Send us an email, info@rotarygainesville.org. We begin our meeting with a song and pledge. Today we do God Bless America. You ready? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now please remain standing for our invocation today, offered by Lori Vidal.
It's a beautiful day out there, isn't it? I do bring one note of sadness in that Martin Dickinson did pass away this past week. So do be remembering Lana Dickinson, his lovely wife, and son Owen, and the family in general. So as they, Milam's will be handling the funeral, and I'm sure the details will be forthcoming. Let's pray together. Summertime is now experientially upon us, with most of the students gone, temperatures rising, significant summer showers, and hopefully time at the beach as much as possible. And we thank you for the rhythms of life and for summer opportunities to actually embrace activities focused on relaxation and recreation. Help us to do that, to recreate ourselves this summer, refill our tanks as we anticipate the craziness of the fall. We do want to remember those here today, as we have mentioned, for Lana Dickinson, and ask you to bless her and thank you for the life of Martin Dickinson. And we pray for any other needs that might be here today. And we now gather again, and we ask you to challenge us with our calling as Rotarians to manifest service above self in everything we do. May our time together be refreshing to all, I pray, in your name. Amen.
You may be seated unless you're visiting us today. We'll bring the wireless mic to you.
Thank you, Dave. Is that on?
Testing.
Hi, Greg Young, and online I have two guests. Richard and Phoebe Miles are visiting today from DC on Zoom, I believe.
Fellow Rotarians, Melanie Shore. I'm honored to have as my guest today Lauren Letelier. She's the Director of Marketing at North Florida Hospital. Welcome, Lauren.
Good afternoon, John Graham here, and my guest today is my friend David Yanitis. David retired from Santa Fe College as a professor and Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs several years ago, and he tells me the most important thing about that job was he was one heartbeat away from being the Vice President of Academic Affairs. And you might turn around so everybody else can see you. I just want to assure everyone that our knowledge and our best hope, we are not related.
Welcome to all of our visitors. In lieu of a poem today, just a reminder that Sunday is Father's Day. Don't forget dads out there. Let's turn the meeting now over to your president. We have a busy program today. Please welcome to the podium your president for the Rotary Club of Gainesville, Greg Young.
Thank you, Tom. So glad everyone's here today joining us for what I think will be a great program. I also want to mention Wilbur. Are you here, Wilbur? Wilbur and Sam Holloway. I've recognized Sam, who's been a member of this club for 48 years, and you weren't able to be here that day, but you're here today, and I want to make sure we recognize your long-term commitment to this club. Thank you, Sam. You're an inspiration, and Wilbur, you're great. You come with your dad every week, and I appreciate that. I've noticed that for years, and it inspires me. So thank you, Sam. Last evening at our board meeting, let's see, incoming board members joined us, along with the outgoing board members and the continuing board members. And some of the board members are rolling off the board after 2 years of service, and I want to thank them for their service to our club. And I'm happy to report that we voted on 2 new members to our Rotary Club, Cheryl Scott and Christine Skelly. Christine, who's the Foundation Development Manager for Community Hospice and Palliative Care, could not join us today. However, Cheryl Scott, I believe, is here. Oh, there's Cheryl. And please stand, Cheryl. She is the board president of Alachua Habitat for Humanity, and please welcome them both. And I hope Scott stays on as a member of this club. Scott Winsler, we love him, and he's done a lot. He's actually a member of our board right now currently as well. Okay, Rotary member Jeff Daubertine is over here, and he's the development director of the Cade Museum for Creativity. And I'm pleased to have Jeff introduce today's program. So Jeff, please come on up.
All right, thank you, Greg, for that warm welcome. So today we actually have 2 presenters. Both are going to be via Zoom. First, we're going to have Rodrigo Griesi. This is a pretty fun story, actually, on how he is associated with the CADE. So every year, the CADE puts on something called the CADE Prize, which we actually have applications being accepted right now. And it's a national competition for people who are inventors and entrepreneurs to showcase their ideas and their inventions. And actually, Rodrigo won the CADE Prize in 2020, but he could not actually attend the award ceremony because he was becoming a U.S. citizen that day. So congratulations, Rodrigo. We're really excited to have you not only as a CADE Prize winner, but also as an American citizen. He founded, when he moved here, a company named Decor, which was actually acquired by one of the largest firms in the world called Accenture, which is a tech firm, in 2020. He's currently working on clean wave and wind energy with his company Neptunia. And the CADE Prize helped fund his first prototype, and he was just awarded from the National Science Foundation for his second prototype. So without further ado, Rodrigo, I'll let you go ahead and present on blue energy.
Thank you. Just a second here while I'll share my screen. All right. Is it showing up for everybody? Yes. All right. So thanks again for having me. It was an interesting story on the day of the celebration, the winning celebration of the CADE Prize. I was and just at the same time sworn in my entire family, actually, that came from Brazil as U.S. citizens. So it was a great week for the entire family. And let me show you guys a little bit about the work that I'm doing right now. And before I tell about our project, our company, I want to introduce the blue economy. It's a term that it's being used for a while, and I will cover the basics only with some explanations, and then my friend John comes after me. We'll expand that into more applications. So what is the blue economy? And it's a term that it's actually an economic term that refers to the preservation and restoration of the oceans while promoting sustainable use of coastal resources. It involves traditional activities that we all know as marine transportation, fishing, tourism, but also includes emerging technologies like renewable energy. And we're both going to talk about that, as well as carbon capturing and ocean data sensing. And there's a few definitions about the blue economy out there. The most used is one called from the World Bank. And it means that the blue economy is a sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and jobs creations while preserving the health of ocean ecosystems. The NOAA, the Oceanic and Atmospheric Association agency, call it more on a scientific level. So it's also something that optimizes and advances in science and technology to create value-added economic opportunities. And last but not least, the DOE calls the blue economy and something that can leverage the immense power and promise of the oceans to achieve our collective economic, social, and environmental goals. And the same DOE has a program called Powering the Blue Economy that covers exactly that. So the idea is to understand the power requirements from emerging coastal and maritime market, while developing and supporting technologies like marine renewable energy to relieve those constraints and enable sustainable growth. It's a very interesting project that funds different research, different development, different engineer, and it's funded by the Department of Energy. And so where Neptunia, my company name Neptunia, fits into the blue economy. And the biggest thing is when we talk about offshore energy or ocean energy, the first thing that comes to mind is the actual technology, the current technology, that is offshore wind farms. We've all seen pictures of it. Maybe some of you already saw one in person. There's lots of offshore wind farms in Europe, and the US is picking up and starting to have that type of solution for clean energy. But the existing solution is limited to shallow waters that have less than 60 meters in depth is where the technology sits. So you can have a structure, a foundation that's bolted to the ground. We call it fixed bottom. So it's mainly adapting a land-based offshore wind turbine to an offshore with a structure. So it's still a land-based turbine, but with a substructure. But this is 20% of global resources in the ocean. The other 80% is on deep waters, more than 60 meters, where you can't have a substructure. You need floating devices. And this is where research and development comes in, because we don't have yet established technology for that. There's a few companies in the planet trying to crack the code to harness these 80% of global resources. It's a lot and can power the whole globe a few times over. And there's not only wind available, there's also waves, and there's also currents and tides. So this is definitely $1 billion opportunity, developing solutions that will solve the needs, the technology needs, the engineering needs, the science needs for floating ocean energy devices. My company, Neptunia Ocean Power, is focused on wind and waves on the same device. And my friend John, coming after my presentation, will talk about his focus on currents and ocean currents and tides and any type of that movement. So in my project, we're rethinking offshore renewable energy by developing a floating vertical mixed mode turbine. That means, of course, it floats, but it uses vertical axis turbines, different than the propeller type one, because there's lots of benefits. And there's also the mixed mode. So when we have wind and waves integrated in the same device, we call it a mixed mode. And this is exactly what we're developing now. With that solution, we aim to generate clean and affordable power. Of course, the first thing, it's a commodity. At the end of the day, it's a high-tech development, but the final product is a commodity. It's power. It needs to be clean, needs to be affordable, needs to be reliable. But we're also trying to lower the capital expenditure for those offshore power plants and clean power plants for harnessing that island. Because usually a regular offshore power, wind power plant costs on the billions of dollars range. But small communities like remote islands, usually with underserved community, they don't have the community power to pull up a project on that size. So they can't afford to have using their own backyard of energy because they have on their backyard, they have access of clean renewable energy, but they can't tap on that because of this high capital expenditure. They can't pull that off. So they end up using diesel generators on remote islands like the Bahamas, pretty close to us. They rely on diesel gensets. So it's not only more expensive for them, but they get tied on the oil industry and they are still burning fossil fuels. It's not helping with the carbon emissions. So this is also what we're targeting. And at the same time, generating positive ocean restorations impacts. When you look at that image on the substructure underwater, you can see a mesh that is an artificial reef. So the concept is to attach artificial reefs on all the substructures in our infrastructure out there in the ocean to support marine life. And I got another slide to show a little bit more about it. So these reefs are being designed by marine biologists to target specific species and help support fisheries. Usually on remote islands, they rely on fisheries a lot. So we're going to support marine life with those structures. Anything you put in the water and in the ocean, marine life grows around it. The idea is to design in a way that will support the species the science tell us that we need to support. So basically, we're creating real estate for fish, if you will, as a byproduct. So again, don't forget about the commodity, the energy. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be cost effective. It needs to be clean. But we have those positive impacts. And there's some other ones that I'm not going to discuss today, that those type of devices have less environmental impact than the fixed bottom one. And we're in the ocean testing stage. We had our first prototype, Mark I, that was partially funded by the CADE prize as well. It was a low-cost prototype that we used to learn a lot about deploying ocean energy devices, stability, buoyancy, power generation, and this was done all here in Florida. And now we were granted this year with the National Science Foundation research grant to develop the second version prototype that will be way more advanced with more features, all the concepts we want to test out, and we're going to end up ocean testing it again. It's going to be a little bit larger than this one, and it's funded by the NSF. But not only the NSF, we're being supported by different companies, and started with NextEra Energy and an FPL through their 35 Mules Innovation Hub. We were part of their accelerator program. So we're very connected with NextEra Energy, and they helped us really to understand the energy industry and get all the context we need to pull that project off. NSF is also supported, the K Museum with the K Prize, and as an FAU as well, the Florida Atlantic University. We're located inside the FAU Tech Runway. So we're supported by the engineering department, all the tank testing, and then the students, the workforce over there. And it's all being designed and built here in Florida. We have all the requirements here to test, to evolve, to design, to engineer. The funding is coming. People are moving to the state. So I think we're blessed to be here. very close to the ocean, so we can do the testing and we can go to the beach and call it work. And so I'm very blessed to be working on this project. It's a life dream for me to be working on this in a country that supports developments that will generate revenue maybe 10 years from now. So it's not something for today, it's something for the next generation for sure. So thank you for having me. And this is my part of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Rodrigo. So next up, we're going to have John Sninsky. So if you guys want to go ahead and start transitioning that PowerPoint. John graduated from the University of Florida in 2013 with a degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. He has applied and been a finalist for the Cade Prize twice. He is the founder of the Current Kinetics, and he is working on hydrokinetic turbine developer using next generation technology to unlock the energy of our oceans. And he is currently testing 2 prototype turbines and is getting support through the Southeast National Marine Renewable Energy Center, as well as the Department of Energy Teamer program. So without further ado, John Sninsky.
Hey everybody, let me put my presentation up here. Let's see. And anybody see this yet? You can see it. Everybody hear me? Okay. All right. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for having me here. The service above self ethos for the Rotary Club kind of goes hand in hand with what Rodrigo and I are doing, because it takes a lot of work and patience to build technology like this. Rodrigo, that was a great presentation. Thank you for touching the bases for the blue economy so that we don't have to kind of repeat each other and everybody's got on the same playing field for all this information. So I'm John Sninsky. Like they said, I went to the University of Florida. I graduated mechanical engineering back in 2013, and I grew up in Gainesville. So I'm a Gainesville native, and I've been working on this technology since I graduated. With the early years being finding funding and doing basic design and prototyping, to where we are at now, where we've finally got some support. We're building higher level prototypes and testing our systems at the National Lab. So without further ado, I'll start here. Let's see. So we design and build next generation ocean energy turbines. We have a novel power takeoff technology, which just means, like Rodrigo was saying, the power generation is the key here. So we use a new style of technology to extract the power out of ocean currents, with our main focus being the Gulf Stream. So what I wanted to comment on the blue economy was there's kind of 3 scales of power production in the blue economy. The blue economy is a focus, I feel like, from the Department of Energy. The blue economy is focused on some smaller scale applications, desalination, fish farming, any kind of auxiliary power for off-grid sites, like Rodrigo was saying. And Alaska has a lot of sites that use diesel power, and they're paying, $1.50 a kilowatt hour, whereas we pay about 10 cents kilowatt hour in our homes. So there's huge opportunity here for renewable energy to come in and bring that cost of diesel generated power down, bring the reliability up, and make it more environmentally friendly. We particularly focus on utility scale. So the interesting thing about Florida is the Gulf Stream current is offshore, and it's the largest ocean current in the world. It's about 15 miles offshore Miami. There's the core of the current, and that flows between the Bahamas and Florida up to Europe and helps them give them a nice microclimate where it's not freezing cold. So the Gulf Stream is a huge economic engine for the state of Florida, and we think that using renewable energy can tap even more into that. See if we can get this video to play. This is just for fun. I got into sailing when I was beginning of college and built a sailboat, and this is how I got into Gulfstream energy, because I did a couple of trips across the Gulf Stream on a little tiny sailboat. So this is kind of on the way over crossing the Gulf Stream, and when you come out the other side in the Bahamas, you've been pushed 30 miles north. So that current runs very quick in there. So let's move on. All right. So I'm glad Rodrigo mentioned wind energy, because current or hydrokinetic energy is essentially the same thing as wind energy. It's, you can imagine a 3-bladed turbine underwater. There's no dams, there's no barrages. It just goes straight in the current flow, which is much better for the environment. You don't have to change the flow of the system. So I kind of see marine hydrokinetic energy paralleling the wind industry. I mean, in the early 90s and late 80s, there were hundreds of companies prototyping wind turbines. And at the end, there was a consolidation of the technology on what you see today offshore or in the middle of the country. And wind energy is actually very successful. It's one of the cheapest forms of electricity we have on the planet today. If we want to make that success transfer over to ocean energy, we need to radically innovate the technology we use, because I would say up until now, hydrokinetic energy has been virtually a wind turbine that's been placed underwater and sealed to keep the water out. And unfortunately, it's not commercially successful yet, because it's very expensive to keep the water out. It's very expensive to go maintenance these machines in the middle of the ocean, especially if they're several miles off. So you really need to come at it with a new point of view, a point of view that requires much less maintenance, something that's meant to work with the ocean environment rather than be placed there from the wind industry. So there's the 3 different scales I was chatting about. There's the utility scale, there's off-grid distributed power, which would be an island or a small community, rural community, and then there's the small scale. To put that into perspective, small scale, like let's say a 10 kilowatt turbine would power about 7 average US homes, and a 1 megawatt power about 750. So we build prototypes in about the 10 kilowatt range. So our prototypes are about a 8 or 9 foot blade diameter and generate roughly enough power for 5 to 7 homes. They're still in testing. So I wanted to put this in here because building technology for generators or electrical machines is not just in the blue economy. It has a huge impact. I mean, we spend $30 billion a year just for the electricity to run industrial motors. Wind turbines generate about 9%. And most of the added capacity to the grid has actually been wind power in the last decade and a half. I have a cool picture here. This is a picture of one of the insides of the GE generators that they're probably going to use offshore near the Rhode Island area. It's the first offshore wind site in the US. It's very exciting. But you can see this is a huge device. That's just the generator. And the technicians there are placing magnets in these large rotors. So you have these big copper coils and you have these big magnets, and that's how these wind turbines work today. The Gulf Stream is what we focus on. It's an exciting resource because the technically recoverable energy from the Gulf Stream, if you put hydrokinetic turbines in there, is about 20% the load for Florida. So there's a ton of power off there. The center of the Gulf Stream is about 800 feet deep. So there are lots of challenges to siting turbines but the basic technology is very similar to offshore wind. I mean, you're running subsea cables to shore where there's a lift station or a power station, and you integrate it into the grid. So we've been really focused on the Gulf Stream. FAU, the lab down south, says that this is a $15 billion market opportunity. And like I said, the weaknesses are maybe the distance to the grid and the deep water site, which is why these rural or off-grid communities, smaller market opportunities are a great place to go, which is what Rodrigo was mentioning. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we build because we kind of had a unique approach to try to get rid of some of the maintenance problems. If you send a ship out to sea to go maintenance one of these turbines, I mean, especially for unplanned maintenance, all of a sudden your budget can balloon. I mean, it can be 10 grand a day just to send 4 or 5 people out in a crew in a research vessel to maintenance the turbines. So we build technology that is water lubricated. So there's no seals, it's full of water, and it uses a unique design. So there's no contact inside of the machine. There's no surfaces, there's no ball bearings, there's no seals. It just uses the lubrication from the water to cool itself and to function underwater for multiple years without any maintenance. That includes going out there and changing oil. There's none of that to do, which also makes it extremely environmentally friendly. I wanted to show you guys, there's a cool style of motor generator that people aren't familiar with. It's called an axial flux. Everybody's used to cylindrical motors, whether it's in an EV car or a powered toothbrush, everybody's used to those can motors. You can actually build generators and motors flat, almost like a sandwich. This is a cool design that came out of the West Coast a number of years ago, which used actually circuit boards, really large circuit boards, and embedded them in this machine to make this super large, lightweight generator. That company is no longer around, but we use a similar technology. So you can see here, this is just a rough basic image, but we use these pads inside the machine that are that can tilt and align themselves to the machine, and the copper windings are embedded in those pads, which kind of float on the surface. You can kind of think of like an ice skate that has wires in it and the ice has magnets in it, so you're generating power. So it's very similar to that. We expect to have a 20-year bearing life, so untouched, no oil changes, and 20 years of maintenance-free operations. I included some cool pictures in here and videos to make it a little more exciting for people. So we have a prototyping shop right by First Magnitude Brewery, right across from Continental Imports, and we've been designing our technology for years, and all of it is from scratch. So it's difficult to prototype when you're doing a one-off for every component. There's the older prototype we have there in the center, and some experimental winding designs we have on the right. Just to show you a couple of videos of manufacturing. Let me know if there's any issues with these videos. Loud. That's here in the shop in Gainesville. That's grinding a bearing for the center. Technology that takes our components, flattens them out. And I include the video because it shows how this technology kind of works. You have a turbine component here on a nice flat surface with a little bit of water. And you can see when you make these surfaces very, very flat and smooth with a little bit of water, you can actually float the components on a layer of water. So this is just pushing one around on the plate, and you can see it just kind of floats on its own. So that's what the inside of the generator is like. All those components are just floating in there on a layer of water. Okay, maybe one more video. We do our winding technology ourselves, which is a super high efficient, very scalable design that we have a patent on. This video is kind of cool. It shows how we manufacture them. And then here on the right, we have a picture of our first prototype in a tank being tested at Florida Atlantic University. Like Rodrigo mentioned, they've been around for a while. They've been pushing the ocean energy concept for at least a decade, and they provide a bunch of great resources down there for testing. So that one has been tested. We have a second prototype that should be down there in a few weeks that's going to get tested, and then hopefully we'll be offshore. Like Rodrigo's had his prototype, we'll be testing, we'll mount the turbine on the front of a big barge and push it around and get a bunch of power production numbers and go from there with maybe some longer term deployments. So it's a very exciting industry, and I think it has a ton of potential, like I said, similar to the way the wind turbine industry was in the early 90s. And there's a huge amount of power that if you have the technology right, there's a huge amount of power that you can pull out of these ocean energy systems. The last thing I wanted to say is a lot of people think, solar power, well, it's easier to have coal or it's easier to have natural gas because the sun doesn't shine all the time and the wind doesn't blow all the time. And the nice thing about current energy, ocean current energy, especially in the Gulf Stream, is that it's 24/7 and it's one direction. So when you are looking at ocean power like that, you're looking at what they call base load power, which means you know exactly when it's going to be generated and exactly how much you're going to get, within a percent or two the next year and the year after that. So when you actually integrate that kind of power into the grid, that stable power, it allows the grid to incorporate more variable power like wind and solar. So the nice thing is advancing ocean energy technology can also help integrate more renewables onto the grid, such as wind and solar, because it stabilizes the grid. So our next step here is finishing up our lab testing in the tank, and then hopefully late this year we'll be in the water doing some push testing. So yeah, thank you guys so much for allowing me to present that to you. I know I didn't touch on the blue economy too much, but I hope that Rodrigo made that a little clearer. But really, this is about building super efficient machines that can scale, be low cost, be easy on the environment, so that we can actually make this industry come into its own like the wind industry did. So thank you very much for having me. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Rodrigo, as well. We're going to open it up for questions here. We have some time. Do we have any Zoom questions already in the queue, or we have someone in the room with a question already? We have one here. So, Joe Coffin.
Beautiful presentation. How long before your working prototype could be marketed at scale?
And that's open to either of the presenters.
I'll go with Rodrigo first because I think he's probably on a quicker path to commercializing for some of the smaller scale resources than we are.
We of course the final goal is get it grid connected, utility scale. There's some stepping stones. We're a small company trying to become a utility level type of company. So we have to figure out those steps. And the first step is small powers and remote islands. So for that market, we intend to have a commercial pilot in probably 4 to 5 years. So that's the initial idea. Of course, to get Florida grid connected is something that will take probably a decade.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to add that Florida Atlantic University, the national lab, has been working to get funding, going and lobbying in DC to get funding to build a test site offshore Florida. So there is a pipeline for that. There's a test site off of Oregon for wave energy. It's a grid connected site. The Department of Energy built it. And that model is supposed to be used for Florida so that we can build test sites so developers can come in here and accelerate to market. But like Rodrigo said, I think, as you go to utility scale, you have to do these long-term pilot projects. So you have to have these turbines in the water for roughly a year at a time. So yeah, utility scale is probably 7 to 10 years. And the product we build now, the 10 kilowatt, depending on how our testing goes, that's something that could be launched for a smaller scale within the next, I would say, 2 to 4 years.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you. Go ahead.
Just adding a little bit. This is one important thing to know, that the tests take a couple of years because you need to have the full seasons with your prototype in the ocean. It's not something that you just test for a couple of hours, a couple of days. You want it to survive to severe weather, maybe hurricane. So you need a very long time just for testing. And you have as well all the analysis of the environmental impacts. And I saw one question that's related to that. Maybe I'll cover that with that. And so this is a really big analysis that's done in parallel of the engineering technology that's being developed. And the US have a bunch of a set of universities and scientists and labs that get together on this permitting process. So the landlord of the ocean is the federal government. So we have to check all the list, the checks and balances they have to minimize all the impacts. And the US, even comparing to Europe, have a greater resolution in terms of what is needed to make sure that the impacts are lower. And the Department of Energy funds a lot of projects for those scientific analysis. And they've been studying for more than 4 years already and comparing ocean-based energy production devices with land-based renewable energy production. And the main result is that on the ocean, you have way less impacts to marine life, including fish, animals, and plants. So this is good news for us. But again, it's being very closely and analyzed with the permitting process and everything, making sure that the impacts are minimized. And that's the maybe that question as well.
Okay, questions on Zoom. The first one you may have just answered, but I'll say it just in case. Jenny asks, how is the placement of these in the oceans determined to minimize impacts on other inhabitants like plants and creatures? So you just started answering that. If you want to add anything, feel free. Otherwise, I'll go to question 2.
Yeah, just one more interesting thing, because when we talk about offshore wind, especially the fixed bottom ones, there's a lot of scrutiny going on those wind farms because the impact on the environment is huge. That's mainly because you're building an Empire State sized tower in the ocean. So imagine if you live in your place and you got an Empire State being built with you. It's not going to be simple. It's going to stress all the marine life around it. Our devices, both my friend John's and our company Netunia, we built everything on the dock, and then we just tow it and moor it and anchor it. So there's no offshore construction. This is what the most impact comes from because of the seabed disturbance. Especially, they need huge jackup vessels to install those turbines. It takes 1 year to complete the whole installation, 200 different ships. So imagine the disturbance, the seabed disturbance, the noise, especially the noise. The noise is what really disturbs more all marine life, migrating species, whales and whatnot. So everything we're doing is to minimize that. So the floating turbines, the assemble ashore, towed, minimize the noise, minimize the construction to almost zero. So this is a new way of doing offshore energy.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that. Yeah, the way that our turbines are mounted are almost like mooring a boat or anchoring a boat. You have a cable from the seafloor, goes up to a buoyancy bag, and you fly the turbines like a kite underwater. The other thing I wanted to add is that there's been a ton of research on marine life using sonar, laser scanning, all kinds of things to see how mammals, undersea mammals, and fish act around these turbines. And as of today, there's been really promising results. The fish don't really go near them, they avoid them, and the speed of the blades underwater is significantly lower than a wind turbine. So there's been no evidence of any fish kills or deaths related to marine energy so far.
Okay, last question on Zoom so far by Michael Pellet. How much power can be drawn from the Gulf Stream before England is affected by loss of the microclimate due to the Gulf Stream? I ask as they have nukes and might want to quickly end the program.
Oh, God.
I think there was a Michael Crichton book on this, or there was a book about like slowing down the Gulf Stream to kind of screw over the Europeans. I mean, you could ask the same question about wind power, taking wind energy out of the environmental system. I mean, the amount of power, if you pull the maximum amount of power out of the Gulf Stream to power 20% of Florida, you're talking about pulling out 1,000th or 10,000th of a percentage of the power in the Gulf Stream. I mean, just the randomness with surface winds and currents and the shape of the seafloor affects the speed of the Gulf Stream exponentially more than an array of devices in there. I mean, if you put these in a river, then yeah, you're going to have it build up, back from the device because you've got this drag and it's going to flood the river a little bit. But when you're talking about an open ocean current like the Gulf Stream, which moves the largest volume of water of any ocean current, the amount of power you're pulling out of that is completely inconsequential.
One more question.
I read that due to climate change, the Gulf Stream is actually slowing down and will eventually stop. Is that so far in the future that that's inconsequential also?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I mean, we have a host of data from ADCPs, which measure the speed of the Gulf Stream, and the lab has been collecting that data over the last 10 years, I believe. The scale of that slowing down is on the order of hundreds or thousands of years. It's still definitely a concern, but that's on a much larger time scale. I think that these technologies fit within our time frame better, because I think eventually nuclear power, fusion, fission, or small nuclear, I think it'll get there. I mean, there's big people funding that, and it's really the best solution for power if you can do it safely. So I think these devices kind of occupy a space for society in between that point where we can get to even better technologies that are going to make energy cheaper and easier for us.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's thank the gentlemen. So Rodrigo and John, I think you both truly exemplify the mission of the Cade Museum and the Cade Prize goals, which is transform communities by inspiring and equipping future inventors, entrepreneurs, and visionaries. And I think you really show that the power of creativity and inventivity. So I want to thank you both today for joining us, taking your time to present this and put this together for us. And tag teaming, I know that wasn't the easiest thing to do, but you guys did it very well, so thank you. I would like to honor both of you with a certificate from afar that we will be making a donation to the Cade Scholarship Fund, which allows children in underserved communities in Gainesville here to attend the Cade, to enjoy the programs and learn from the programs that help spark wonder in the minds of young people. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
We'd love to meet
Thank
you
you
in
all.
person sometime when you come to Gainesville. Come look us up. We meet on Tuesdays at the Cade Museum.
I'd love to.
Please
Me
do.
too.
Well, everyone, thanks for attending today. Those on Zoom, those here in the room. I hope you'll join us here with your guests next week when we will have Nell Page here to present the Hippodrome Theater celebrating 50 years in our community. I appreciate everyone's ongoing help clearing the tables. That's made it so nice and quick to transition for the Cade staff and for ourselves. And quote of the day, a transition to clean energy is about making an investment in our future. Gloria Rubin. So the last 3 digits of the Rotary Reading Safari lottery is, or raffle, excuse me, is 981981. And with that, we are adjourned. All right, Susan.
Thanks. Yeah, Patrice wanted all